Hey, good Saturday afternoon. Carl Rauminger here, 540-0580. Get your legal questions answered here live on the air. If you haven't heard the show before, I'm a lawyer. I practice in the mid-state. We've got offices in Lancaster, Chambersburg, Carlisle, and on April 1st, Harrisburg. And we are available for you, but of course we're available here on the air every Saturday where I answer your legal questions. So it's free, 540-0580. Call in. You've got a question you want to know about a divorce, you want to know about a personal injury case, you just have a question about the law in general, you want to know why judges do certain things, you want to know why certain laws are a certain way, we'll try to field it right here on the air, 540-0580. And it's a beautiful day out, except it's a little chilly. I've got Mark Virginis here. Mark.
How are you, Carl?
Good. For people who listen frequently, you probably remember Mark is our go-to guru on all things economic, and he's on the Weekend Appointment website as a friend of the show in case you want to follow up with him afterwards. And I know, Mark, you have a little disclaimer because your profession has a little requirement that you give some language before you talk to folks. So what is it?
Yes, thanks. I'm the president and owner of Mirus Financial Partners. I'm an investment advisor representative offering securities and advisory services through Financial Network Investment Corporation. Member SIPC, Mirus Financial Partners, and Financial Network are not affiliated. Thank you.
All right, and that's the disclaimer out of the way. Of course, my disclaimer is at the beginning of the show. We do that as the lead, and otherwise I'd have to do it each time, too. Mark, the thing I wanted to talk to you about, I just want to make sure the callers know, if you've got a legal question, call in. If you want to weigh in on the economic issues that Mark's going to help us with, feel free to call in about that. You want to talk about your retirement plan, estate planning, things like that. Obviously, Mark and I can help you with that as well. But, Mark, the reason I got you is obviously, and as you know, Japan has a nuclear crisis and a tsunami. The Middle East has a tsunami of protests going on. And I guess there's a larger upheaval in a big oil-producing area, and at the same time, it looks like nuclear energy might be getting a black eye that might not go away for another couple decades.
Right.
Any advice for us on how to process this in the terms of the economy?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would always, I don't know if you've heard this term, but the events in Japan, and of course our hearts go out to the folks over there, what they're going through. We kind of saw it with Katrina here a little bit, but nowhere near the magnitude that Japan's going through right now. But I look at that as a black swan event. You know, the metaphor is it's a surprise and a major impact.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 9/11 would be the closest thing I could think of in this country to something like that. But anyway, from an investment perspective, is what my clients and people who are like yourself are asking me is, I look at it as basically a three-pronged impact: interest rates, inflation, global growth. You talk about Japan, third largest economy in the world. And before this event happened, no one was talking about them leading the economic global growth. Everybody was talking about us. They were talking about the BRIC nations, the Brazil, Russia, India, China. Japan never really entered into that equation. So it wasn't. I don't believe Japan is going to stop the global growth. It wasn't going to help it initially, and it's not going to stop it now. What you're going to probably find is folks with the commodities itself. You talked about Libya and Egypt and I guess now Syria too. The government opened fire on protesters in Syria just recently.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, oil is up about $20 since this whole skirmish started. I believe it closed about 105, 106. I didn't think we crossed over 100 to the end of 2011 prior to the skirmishes in the Middle East, but of course that processed it higher. But with Japan, the opportunities are going to be one that folks are going to be looking at the commodity prices because, of course, you got to rebuild a nation over there right now. And most of the commodities are traded in U.S. dollars. So that means the U.S. dollar is going to remain lower. Again, this is my 2 cents on this. The U.S. dollar is going to remain lower. So if the U.S. dollar remains lower, that means commodity prices are really cheap for other countries to buy. So commodity prices should shoot up and stay up as they are right now. Whether it's agricultural, because all these Middle Eastern nations, what they want a middle class. And what's the first thing middle class people? When people become poor, when they're poor and they enter into the middle class, you could say they want to buy a car or they're going to buy a home. But basically, the first thing they want to do is eat better.
Okay.
And so the commodity of the agricultural side actually might pass, or from a percentage basis gain, might actually pass the energy side. And that's just because you're talking about billions of people entering the middle, not only in China, but all around in the Middle East, if this thing stays and takes hold. So one of my biggest investment themes for 2011, as well as 12, 13, and 14, is commodities. I think everybody should have that as an inflation hedge. Everybody should have it as a growth. Now, to what extent, that's going to be depend on your time horizon, your risk tolerance, and where you are in your life, whether it's saving for retirement, college, or just, taxable accounts, what have you. And there's many ways to get involved in that, which I'd be happy to talk with some folks off the air, or next week, or if they want to call the office, because everybody's situation is different.
Yeah, and you have the same situation I do a lot of times with folks, which is, well, we can talk in generalities on the air and kind of say this is what I'm thinking, or this might be a good idea. It's always the details that make the difference, and a lot of those details just aren't things you talk about on live radio.
Right, and you see the pundits on TV saying, buy this, buy this, buy this. Now, first of all, they're probably financial journalists. They don't hold the same licenses that I do, so quite frankly, they don't have to be right. I mean, as well as, like you gave your disclaimer, I gave my disclaimer, they don't have disclaimers. Because, again, they don't actually trade for anybody's account but their own. When I get involved in handling other clients' monies, that's when you have a separate level. You have the SEC, FINRA, you have other people stepping and saying, what did Mark say, how did he say it, when did he say it?
Right.
So, and your situation is the same.
All right, Mark, I got a couple callers holding here, so let's take some calls. 540-0580. Maureen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This isn't really too relevant to your guest there, and hopefully it'll just be a quick little.
That's okay. That's okay. We're taking all the questions.
Okay. Every election season, I have this situation where people put election signs. I have a business close to a polling place, and they start putting their election signs in the spot it's my lawn. I have to mow it and everything, but between the sidewalk and the street, and right in front of my office. So. It kind of looks like I'm supporting various candidates or whatever. And I know that that's private property, those signs, but I wonder, do they really have the right to stick them there? Because, like I said, it really does give the impression that I'm supporting people, and I don't really want to be political at all in my business. So I was just wondering if I have the right to remove them when they're put there, or if I do, if that is, they do have the right to stick them there just because of the location of where they are.
How close to you are they?
It's probably 5 feet from my front steps.
And this is in the verge itself, or I'm not.
Yeah, I guess that's what it's called. Yeah, they do. Right in the verge there, I guess is what it's called. The grassy area between the curb and my sidewalk, right in front of my house.
To the extent that you own the verge, I would say that they can't just put the signs there. Okay. If you don't own the verge for some reason, but most people own out to the middle of the road, and the sidewalk is your duty, and so is the verge. And if somebody's sticking on your property without your permission, particularly a political sign, I don't see a problem with taking them down. What I would do, however, is call the candidates who they're for and let them know and say, hey, we took your signs down. We have them available if you want them. Because somebody stuck them up. But please make sure they don't go up again.
Okay.
All right?
Very good.
All right, Maureen, I'm going to go to break. When we come back, you'll be on. Tim will talk with Mark Virginis, 540-0580. I'll see you guys after the break. Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here. Mark, do I have you?
Yes, you do.
All right, that was my bad. I accidentally dumped you when I went to the caller. I apologize.
Hey, first time, long time, right?
The good news is it was just a stupid legal question, and you didn't need to hear it anyhow. And it wasn't a stupid question. I just mean from the standpoint of you wanting to know about finance and probably could care less about political signs and verges. But let me tell you, what the lady's problem was, somebody was sticking signs in her verge that for candidates, and she's wondering if she could take them out. And I said, yeah, if that's your land, I wouldn't just throw them out, though. I would contact the candidate, and I'd let them know. And, of course, if anybody out there is working, political season is coming up, you see these crazy signs stuck on, like, Interstate 81 at the exits and things like that. That just doesn't look good. That tells me that you couldn't find anybody who would give you permission to put your sign up.
Right. I don't think legally, it's not your property. You can't put them there, but it's just, the city or the borough or whatever doesn't want to waste time and money and manpower by taking them down, so they just kind of say, okay,
yeah,
clean them up later. We'll be okay with it.
Tim, you're on with Carl and Mark. Tim.
Yes.
What's your question?
Yeah, we bought a car for my daughter about 6 months ago up in Hazleton. And when we bought it, we had a question about the brakes on the car because they didn't feel right. And we came back the next day, he said it was all fixed. We drove it back home to Duncannon, and the car, my daughter drove the car maybe 100 miles, if that. It sat for about 3-4 months, and we just went to have it inspected and have the brakes looked at. It turns out the front wheel bearing was totally gone. He said he's lucky that the tire didn't even fall off. Front pads and front rotors are totally shot. And the back drums on the brakes are gone, as well as the rocker panels.
All right. Well, let me put it to you this way. What I'm getting from you is there's a lot of serious defects with the car, particularly
Correct.
ones which make it unsafe to drive.
Correct.
Okay. So what's the question?
The car dealer's now gone out of business.
All right.
Do we still have repercussion against him?
Well, you might, to the extent that you can reach him. But, there's this blood and stones or blood and turnips story out there that, if there's nothing there, there's nothing to get. And so if he's out of business and he was a corporation and it was properly wound down, there might not be any assets left to go after. On the other hand, if it's an individual and to the extent he has some personal wealth, you might be able to reach him. But when you come see a guy like me, the big issue I'm going to tell you is how much money you want to spend to pursue somebody who probably is judgment-proof at the end of the day.
Okay, that's what I had a feeling. I had a feeling we were kind of out.
Yeah, buyer beware. And that's the problem. A lot of times you're harmed, but there's no recourse. And I have clients that have terrible harm sometimes, but there's nobody to sue because there's nobody that can actually pay even if we win. Other times there's plenty of people to pay, but there's no proof of the harm, and other times there's no harm. So you can see all the problem. We have to have everything together in the right case in order to get money for somebody, or at least justice, so to speak. And this guy probably went out of business for the very reason that obviously he wasn't very good at what he did.
Right.
All right, Tim, sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care.
Yep, bye.
Mark, what do they say? You got to be careful who you do business with, and of course, when you're a consumer doing business with other small businesses, you're at the mercy of whether they go bankrupt or effectively just disappear.
Yeah, that's if I'm buying a car for my daughter or anybody, or we're looking at different vehicles, you ask around, you get the referrals, you find out what kind of experiences other folks have had. It's your business and that's my business. And it's a relationship business, and I get referred by my clients to their friends, family, colleagues. I'm sure you do the same.
Yeah, and usually that's the safest bet. The one thing you always run into is you never know when you're going to be, the first guy to have the terrible experience.
This is true.
Leslie, you're on with Carl and Mark.
Okay, I'm a 76-year-old widow. I live alone in a condo. I have an executor will, an executor, the three things I need: the executor, for the death, the thing for the death, and I guess I'm nervous to answer the three things. But here's my problem. Recently, my family thinks I should be moving out of the condo. They're talking about nursing homes. I'm in moderately good health. There are stairs in the condo, which they worry about. I work, so obviously I'm not feeble or anything else. But my family is getting more and more antsy about moving me out. And I saw a woman a couple years older than I just literally moved out of her house. No, she didn't have the right to say yes or no. And I want to know what I can do to protect myself from anything. Can I have something drawn up by a lawyer, or what can I?
Power of attorney, Carl?
Yeah, you're afraid that who's going to move you out of the house? That your family's going to do it?
My family.
Well, the short answer is they can't do anything without your consent or or if they get a guardianship for you, which would mean a judge would have to determine that you're no longer competent, and that's a very high burden to prove.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you're paying your bills and as long as you're legally entitled to be there, i.e., you have a rent or a deed or whatever, your family can't move you out. Now, can they pressure you? Can they do the things that sometimes people do where they, grab you and say, you need to sign this, you need to do that? What you need to do is not sign anything unless you're absolutely sure what you're signing, number one.
Okay.
And number two, and now, maybe your family's listening and they're going, oh, Carl, please don't say this to her because, she's in terrible shape and she just doesn't realize it.
Well, they're all out of town, so I don't think so.
And the reason I say that is there is a thing that happens, and it's not a thing that happens with older people. It's a thing that happens with human beings where, somebody said, I said to somebody, you're crazy, and they said, no, I'm not crazy. I said, well, that's what crazy people always say, they're not crazy. And my point is, we sometimes don't realize our own condition. Right. And so you need, and I'm just telling you, make honest evaluations of that. And the thought of losing independence is obviously a scary thing. But at a certain point, and it sounds nice and hypothetical, but at a certain point, you might need that help. And obviously, you're a good judge of that. But if you
Can
just
I bring somebody else into the picture that could help me in case...
Absolutely. And the more you can do to...
What kind of a person would I be bringing into the picture?
Well, I mean, it depends what you want. If there's somebody that can help you in terms of if you have a good friend who can help you, if you have somebody you want to bring in that you don't want to pay to be a personal assistant, I mean, or if you just want to, have a lawyer like myself that you can call so that when the family shows up and starts demanding things, I can give you my independent evaluation of where you're at. But I'm not a doctor. Usually what I would do is have you go to the doc and talk with the doc and say, where are we at physically and mentally in terms of our ability to care for ourselves. And then I would make my own independent determination of capacity as a lawyer, which we regularly do when people come in to do wills, et cetera. And you sound...
I do have a lawyer with the will and power of attorney and the executor and the I can't think of the name of the one for pulling the plug.
Yeah, the Advanced Life Care Directive or Living Will.
Yeah.
And
so
listen,
I have
Leslie,
three family members that have that, and my concern is, can any one of them...
they can't use that as long as you're conscious and competent.
Okay.
And Leslie, let me put it this way: you sound wonderfully oriented to the real world, so I don't think you're in imminent danger of dementia or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just say, and that's why I always say it's tough because you're getting competing pressures. Now, I went out and wrote a living will for a woman not too long ago who was dying because she knew her family was going to have a huge fight over her care, and she knew that a couple of the kids wanted her to go to the hospital and get, heroic measures, and she just wanted to basically hospice at home.
Right.
And of course, I knew all the kids because I've been representing the family forever, and I remember thinking, oh, man, a couple of them are going to be mad at me, but that's what she wanted. And that's the other thing, is just to make sure that the people around you do know what you want.
Okay.
All right?
Mm-hmm. I think that helps a lot.
All right. Hey, you did fine on the radio. If you were nervous at first, I can't tell now.
Okay.
Good luck, Leslie.
All right.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Let's see. Who else we've got? Here's next. Margaret, you're on. Oh, that's not Margaret. That was the newsroom. Margaret, you're on with Dan and Carl.
Okay.
Or Mark and Carl.
Whatever.
Margaret, I'm hitting all the wrong buttons and reading all the wrong lines.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I'm a retiree, just a recent retiree. I retired in December, and my employer has yet... I understood at the time of retirement because they gave us a lot of information about retirement and what to expect, and I knew that it would be, they also have a pension program, it would be 10 to 12 weeks before we would be able to be getting anything from our pension. And that occurred on March the 11th, 12 weeks. And I was prepared to pay for all expenses and living and so forth, and not planning anything major, but I have yet to receive any money and received recent paperwork stating that it's going to not be 10 to 12 weeks, but 18 weeks before, and this is just on paper, it'll be April, mid to late April before I receive a pension. is there any recourse in this situation?
So, So
you're talking pure pension. You're not talking 401k or any money you personally set aside.
Yes,
it is
money. It is money that I contributed. They require a contribution of 5% when you're employed.
But it was to a pension fund, not a 401k or an IRA.
Yes, it was to a pension fund that they operate, but one of the options upon retirement is that the money and interest accrued on the money that I put in was going to be able to be withdrawn, and then I'm rolling that over. But
so you're making a withdrawal rather than taking a benefit.
Well, they provide both. They provide the option to have a monthly pension, the payable monthly money, and also you can withdraw the accumulated deductions that I put in and roll them over.
So when you say roll over, you're rolling it over to an IRA?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you my personal experience. I had an attorney who left the law firm to join another law firm, and they had a pension. And we just received the money, and he left in 2010, and the same story, because they have to do auditing of the pension.
Well, I understand that, but they had given us the opportunity to make a decision June of last year, 2010, and my paperwork was all in by mid-October.
Right, but what I'm trying to tell you is I had my paperwork in with this law firm, and again, the taxes and so forth and all the accounting has to be done on the pension plan by a separate third party, and it took us the 10 when you said 10 to 12 weeks, that in my mind I'm like, yeah, that's about right, on pension plans. But now you're saying 18 weeks. Maybe Carl could jump in here from a ERISA type law and say if there's anything she can do. I'm lost here.
I mean, you don't want to be biting the hand that is ultimately going to be feeding you for the rest of your life. But I put in 30 years of work there.
And Margaret, actually, I appreciate the fact that you said that, because I have so many times that clients come in and they want to sue somebody, and then I get halfway through going over everything with them, and I look at them and I'm saying, now, you sure you want to sue this guy? I mean, you're going to be.
No. I don't think.
Oh no. And I'm not saying, but they forget about the fact that they might be doing business with the person in the future.
Right.
And I say, so you do want to do business with them again in the future? Well, yeah. Okay. Well, then you really can't. You can't poison that relationship if you don't need to. Now you might be able to with something like a pension fund or something like that. That's really an inanimate entity, but nonetheless, it sounds like it's taking longer than they promised.
Yes.
What I would need to look at is and see if there's any terms in the actual policy itself that says how much time they have to process these things. In other words, there probably should be a manual that you got at one point.
Right. And 10 to 12 weeks is printed.
Is printed in the manual.
Yeah.
And so here's the other thing. In the law, we have magic words called time is of the essence. And so probably we would say as long as it's not materially different than that,
okay,
it's probably okay. Unless the magic words are time is of the essence, meaning it's essential it be on a certain date or time or time frame.
Right. Yeah.
And so they probably haven't materially breached it yet, not in a legal sense, but they're probably going to get there.
Ugh.
And then the question is, what are your damages? And your damages are you probably missed a payment or two.
Not yet, but my savings is almost to zero.
Right. But I mean, you missed a payment of what money? In other words, we would say you guys should have started her payments on X date, and it's taking you this long, so she's out, 3 months of payments or 1 month of payments or something along.
I think they're going to pay that. I hope so. I'm planning on it.
Oh, yeah, so they may pay you retroactively as a lump, but then you don't have any real harm at all, except that you starve to death in the meantime.
Yeah, and the house is cold. And
right. I follow. All right, Margaret, if you don't get anything in the next couple weeks, just drop me a line off the air and we'll figure it out.
Okay.
All right, take care. I got to go to break.
Thank you.
540-0580. Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here, joined by Mark Virginis. We're discussing people's legal questions, a little bit of financial questions. And Mark, before we go back to the callers, at the beginning of the show, we talked just a little bit about the crisis in Japan and the Middle East and the turmoil. And you kind of opined that you said you think that's going to push commodities up, and that's going to be a good potential play for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, Japan, again, the third largest economy in the world. It's probably going to push inflation down. You might even see deflation, because when the third largest economy doesn't have a demand for goods and services, I mean, that's going to be deflationary itself. But the overall impact of rebuilding a country, especially, it's going to be more efficient, it's going to be newer, it's going to be state-of-the-art. You're going to see a lot of different looks at Japan, a lot of different architecture firms. I think construction will be off the charts. I mean, you're going to have companies from the United States going over. I mean, if you remember the price of plywood and drywall when Katrina happened, take that to the nth degree now over in Japan.
And theoretically, the Japanese have been criticized for having an excessive amount of savings.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're probably now going to be able to dip into that and really spend some money on the rebuild.
Oh yeah, that's one of the most attractive things. Again, to put this in an investment perspective, not making light of the horrific tragedy that's over there, but you have a third largest economy in the world that's going to act like an emerging market. What a tremendous investment opportunity. In fact, if I had to, and I never do this, but for the first time ever, I'll tell you one of my top 10 investment themes for 2012, it's going to be Japan.
Right.
It's going to be top 3, if not the number 1. You're going to have, and think about, you talked about the savings rate and how disciplined that is. Did you hear anything about looting, stealing, burglarizing, riots? You didn't hear any of that. I mean, I remember, again, I go back to the tragedies of 9/11. I remember the reports coming out of there. Now, again, maybe there's not enough news crews there because of the nuclear possibilities, but I remember people trying to rob the Brooks Brothers down by the Twin Towers. You just have that country, Japan, was they're very methodical. They exercised. They did a lot of drills because tsunamis are always there's something that's always been talked about. Earthquakes a little bit so, but you really have a very disciplined populace over there, and the land of the rising sun will rise once again in the very, very near future.
And so we're thinking commodities, and of course you're thinking maybe even just direct foreign investment in Japan.
I bet you your global REIT, your global real estate investment trusts, your commodity play, and you can slice down your commodity play to be energy, agriculture, as well as some possible inflation hedges. Your precious metals, because the silver, palladium, nickel, all that stuff is used. Iron, iron ore to make steel. There's different ways to get into there. If you have a stock trader out there and people are trying to buy individual stocks, that they can do that too, as opposed to what I do for my clients is through mutual funds, through no load or load wave mutual funds, play the commodity game. And there's several places to do that, or ETFs or what have you. So again, everybody's situation is different. I'm just talking in generalities here, but that's where I would go if I'm looking to capitalize on the growth and the rebuild of Japan.
Okay. We got some callers. Let's see what we got here. Larry, you're on with Carl and Mark.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Before we get to our legal point, I wonder if Mark has factored into his plans for making money off the Japanese rebuild, if that factors in the possibility that Fukushima is going to render much of northeastern Japan inhabitable due to radiation leakages. How would that change his advice, if any?
Carl, could you repeat that?
Yeah.
I heard the first part, but it faded out.
And I know sometimes with the sometimes when I'm on with Bob, I have hard times hearing the callers because there's something screwy in this phone system here at WHP, and I'm sure you've heard Durgan complain about it. He's basically saying, what if the radiation leaves most of that area of Japan or a large swath of the northern portion there uninhabitable? How does that affect your outlook?
Yeah, that's the X factor, isn't it? We talked about that, the nuclear fallout, that seems to be changing at least weekly, if not daily. And we're not going to really know the full realm of the nuclear fallout to what degree. I just read something where the Prime Minister now is trying to place blame on the operator of that particular nuclear facility. So, yeah.
What, Mark, maybe I would say to Larry is we'll probably have an answer to that in the short term. I mean, we probably won't have to wait 6 months. If they evacuate everybody and we get the fact that there's terrible radiation readings, I guess we can assume that they're not going to be moving back in anytime soon.
No. Then the way to play that from an investment perspective is figure out if there are any companies who deal in nuclear cleanup or nuclear removal or hazardous waste removal, and how does that fit into the equation of removing whatever waste or damage is over there from the nuclear reactor, which is monumental, to say the least.
Yeah, that's a good play to consider. Excellent. Okay, our legal question,
Sure.
real succinctly. We were robbed almost a year ago by a juvenile, age 15 at the time, grand larceny. Filed charges, police investigated, took him to court. The judge here in Dauphin County ruled him guilty and imposed a pretty deep sentence. Unfortunately, as we discovered, the sentence didn't have any guidelines in terms of a time frame in which he had to meet his obligations. And when we checked with Juvenile Victims Protection Services here in Dauphin County, we were told that the juvenile has until he's 21 years of age to fulfill some, all, or perhaps none of the judge's sentencing of him. And at that time, during that time, of course, we're without our money.
Right.
And then they told us that the parents aren't responsible for the acts or crimes of their children. And when we grew up in our generation, it was always our understanding that parents were legally responsible for their children until the children turned age 18. If that understanding was at one time true, our question is, when did that policy change? When did juveniles no longer become responsible to their parents and vice versa?
Well, the short answer is we've never liked the concept of making one individual responsible for the acts of another. That's in the law. We just don't like to do that. But you're right. Historically, there was the idea that if a child committed an act at common law, that the parent could be responsible. Pennsylvania has capped that liability, I believe, at $2,500. And so I'm surprised that the parents weren't sucked in on it, because I was involved in a juvenile matter not too long ago where the parents aren't paying up the first $2,500, or basically they have to each parent has to pay in half of the $2,500 to contribute towards the juvenile's debt. So I don't know why Dauphin County didn't order that.
Interesting.
And again, here's the other thing. The reality is, even with adults, in criminal cases, restitution is rarely ever paid in significant amounts. And the reason is, quite frankly, the government takes their money, right? They got their supervision fees, and but most of the time the people can't realistically afford, over the time frames they're given, the money that's claimed.
Our understanding in this particular case is that the family is not all that destitute and the money is available.
Well, if the parents could be reached, right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the next question is, to what extent why the court didn't. And it's probably too late at this point for the court to do that. Now, if it's been less than 2 years, you could certainly sue the juvenile and try to reach the parents under that civil cap.
Okay.
And that may be a possibility.
All right.
All right. The short answer is, I had a judge tell me one time, he was a president judge at Crawford County up the other end of the state when I was working as a law student for a law firm up there, and he told me one time, and I just always took this to heart, he said, I wish the legislature had never authorized restitution and required me to enter it sentencing. He's like, because every time I order restitution, I basically know I'm going to get an angry letter 6 months or a year later that the person still hasn't been paid.
Mm-hmm.
And Larry, you feel that pain, don't you?
Yes, we do.
All right, my friend, take care.
He's walking around out there with our money.
I know. I got to go to break. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
540-0580. Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here, 540-0580. Got Mark Virginus here answering some financial questions. I got some really patient callers who've been holding, so let's get who's next is Will. You're on with Carl and Mark.
Hello?
Hey, Will.
Hey, how you doing, Carl?
Good.
I got a question for you. It's not really a financial one. It's I got a DUI not too long ago, in which I was parked outside of my car, keys not in the car, walking into the house that I was going to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the cop did not turn his lights on, pulled up behind my car, and asked me to go back to the car. I said, are you asking me or are you ordering me back to the car? All he said was, yeah. So that kind of put me in a bind. I didn't know if I should just ignore him or go to the car. So obviously I went to the car because he's a cop.
Right. Did he? Let me back up for a second. Did he see you driving?
Yes, he actually followed me because I followed me for about I'd say about 3 miles, 4 miles.
Okay.
And then when he when he stopped me, the reason he was stopping me was because I ran a stop sign right by the house that I was at. Now, I know for a fact because there was a witness that was out. It was in the wee hours of the morning that said I did, in fact, stop and rolled down and parked my car, got out, and was heading towards the house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he then proceeded to try to give me the field sobriety test, in which you told me before you don't have to take it if you don't want to.
Correct.
When you don't, I didn't take it, so then they were saying, well, we're going to go to the jail.
Mm-hmm.
So they read me my Miranda rights and everything, took me to the jail, and I actually only blew I think it was a .093.
Okay.
Now, my question is do I have a leg to stand on to fight this? Because, to be honest, I really wasn't that intoxicated, but I also feel like I didn't need to go back to the car, and he didn't explain to me whether or not he was ordering me back to the car or if,
right.
he was just asking me.
When did he turn his lights on the overhead on his car?
Never turned them on.
Just pulled into your driveway and ordered you back to your car?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay, that's probably the seizure right there.
The way the street's set up, the cars are parked along the street.
Yeah, that's the seizure right there when he does that. The question is, you could file what's called a suppression motion, and if the judge finds that he didn't have probable cause or reasonable suspicion, actually would be the better term, reasonable suspicion to believe that criminal activity was afoot, i.e. that you ran the stop sign,
mm-hmm.
then he wouldn't have a basis to stop you and order you back to the car, and then you would throw out all the evidence, including the BAC, which was ultimately retrieved.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have a leg to stand on. Here's the dilemma. Are you a CDL driver?
No, I'm not.
Okay, if you're a CDL driver, ARD won't help you, which is Accelerated Rehabilitative Disposition. Do you have any prior criminal background?
Nope.
So this would be a first offense. You could get the ARD. You do 6 months of roughly unsupervised probation, jump through a couple magic hoops, pay a fine, and then they expunge it off your record, except it screws up your car insurance.
And it stays on your record for 10 years.
On your car insurance record, yeah. Yeah, publicly it wouldn't be available to anybody else. Law enforcement would have it and hold it against you for 10 years.
Okay. So that's about it. Just basically look towards ARD and just kind of take my comeuppance and go.
Yeah, that's probably what I would recommend. Now, a little caveat, I have had cases where we've been able to explain to a police officer what we think the issues are with the case and resolve it at the preliminary hearing without it going up to court for ARD or DUI. So those are your other possibilities. All right?
So if I wanted to fight it, do you think it would be in my best interest to fight it, or would you say it'd probably be easier just to take the ARD?
I think that 90% of the time, if you hired me, we would end up taking the ARD. What I tell people why you hire a guy like me, even when you're pretty sure you're going to take ARD, is for the 5 to 10% chance that we can avoid any consequence. And based on what you're telling me, I'm not certain, but I might, who knows? But I might want to look over the area where this happened, but I would think that you may be able to angle it. I'm not sure. All right? I don't want to lead you down the primrose path either.
Well, no, I get what you're saying.
All right, dude.
All right, thanks, man.
Thanks, man. Dal, you're on with Carl and Mark.
Yeah, I'm here. It's Mark, but you have a caller?
Dale.
Hey, Carl, how are you?
Yeah,
Hello?
Dale, you're on with Carl and Mark. What's going on?
Hey, this is probably a stupid question, but I figured if anyone can answer it, you might. What is the difference, if there is any difference, between a PFA and a restraining order?
Well, Pennsylvania, when people talk about restraining orders and hear it on TV, I have a restraining order, that's generally the same thing. But PFA is a statutory creation, and it's a strict framework. It's a strict framework that the statute lays out and how it works. The restraining order concept is more of a common law civil concept in Pennsylvania, where you might get an injunction against somebody as a nuisance or a problem. So the PFA is really the exclusive remedy of the fear of violence or domestic violence, but you have to have a certain relationship with the party, usually familial, sexual, etc. On the other hand, the restraining order could be against anybody. So the restraining order would come into play when you have like the stalker who's like your fan. So, like if you're the Hershey Bears and Art Selby's following you around, you might get a restraining order against him rather than a PFA because you don't have a familial or sexual relationship with him.
Okay, I wasn't sure if there was a difference in the two.
Yeah, one's basically a form of an injunction to common law, and the other one's a statutory creation designed basically to prevent domestic violence.
Okay, thanks, Carl.
All right, brother.
Bye.
Let's see. Dennis, you're on with Carl and Mark. Dennis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carl. I went through, well, my wife left me in 98. She walked out, found out later she had been having an affair. State of Pennsylvania still made me pay alimony for a period of time. I had to go through bankruptcy. Alimony was finally done with. But in the meantime, I've gone through 2 different lawyers on this, and I'm kind of tapped out. And I'm just wondering, it's now been a case that since 1998 until now, is there any way I can get like a common law divorce? She won't answer. She's just...
Dennis, you're going to have to hit me up off the air. Sorry about that, Dennis. Hit me up off the air. Mark, thanks for coming on. If people want your contact information, I've got it up at weekendappointment.com. And if they shoot me an email, I can make sure they get it as well. But it's right up there on weekendappointment.com if you want to talk to Mark. All right, Mark, thank you very much.
Thanks, Carl. Have a great weekend.
All right. And I'm going to put up on weekendappointment.com a number for the Senior Law Center one of our callers gave us.